This is a Leadership Breakdown podcast. I'm Kylie Ota, intuitive business strategist and leadership coach. I'm here to break down the strategies for leadership and to address the breakdown that is happening in our leadership today. So let's break it down, shall we? Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Leadership Breakdown podcast, where we break down different leadership strategies. And today we are going to be talking about the hidden cost of your leadership decisions, right? And I see this as a place where a lot of breakdown in leadership happens. And it's not always evident, I'm going to just tell you a real-time story that's happening today. So the gym that I go to, they're currently under renovation, but here's the kicker. The decision that they made was to inform people of what was happening only via social media. And it was really, disconcerting. So there's a group of us girls that all work out together. We attend the same classes. And so we have a separate group chat. So there's all of us in this chat that are talking to each other and like, hey, did you see this? Did you hear this? Right. So we are creating our own, in Hawaii, what we call the coconut wireless, where it's like word of mouth, communication, like down the line. Right. So, right, we're creating this little coconut wireless group on, our text messaging thread. And it really occurred to me what's happening right now is affecting their brand identity. And we're going to break down the cost of that here in this episode. But the brand identity, how I describe it, is there are two sides of your brand identity, right? There is the brand equity, where people love you and, they love everything about you. And then you have brand erosion, where people, maybe they, you know, people like you, and then as you start showing up as this version of yourself, they're like, maybe my trust in her at the beginning was misplaced, and therefore your brand has been eroding. And so using this gym as the analogy, right? Our brand, their brand is eroding in our eyes because we're like, huh? And this was a decision that a leader in the gym had made, whether it was, the main boss, the GM, ops manager, right? We don't know who contributed to this decision, but it affects the brand identity as a whole. You see what I'm saying? And not that we're going to leave the gym anytime soon, because a lot of us have been there for a long time, and we've paid our membership dues and whatever, but this is a big inconvenience. And how many other people who may not have the brand loyalty may consider next month, like, hey, like, I couldn't work out for 2 days and the communication sucked. So what are the chances that this is going to happen again to me in the future? Right. And the leadership probably did not think about the cost of that decision. They didn't think about the people who may cancel their membership because of this decision. They're just like, oh, this works for us in-house operationally. So therefore, like, and the funny part was there was no communication from the gym itself. A lot of the coaches that work at the gym were the ones sending out the communication. So again, I was like, hey, I get this, but you should have sent out a general email blast, because we all have our phone numbers on file, we have our emails on file, and they have mass texting capability. They have mass email capability, that they can send out an email blast, a text blast, and just say, hey, this is what's happening over the next week or so during the renovation, because the renovations have been announced. It's just that plan of execution has not been announced. And we are finding out in real time what their execution strategy is. And it does not work for a lot of us. So, yeah, this is why I'm bringing up the story today, because I was all ready to go to a 6 a.m. gym class, because I had it all mapped out on my calendar, my schedule, that this is the best time for me to go to the gym. And I'm like, oh, and I'm the kind of person that I don't like to do my own thing at the gym. I like to go to a 1 hour class and have the instructor just tell me what to do. So it's one less thing that I have to use my own brain power to think about. So that's why I like the classes and I'm okay with that. So, you know, the lesson here really is the cost of this decision that the gym made to notify or lack of notification that has affected their brand identity. And so I know there are some of you who are like, okay, I'm not in the online space. I don't have an online presence. I'm more of a corporate girl. And I get that. So, how that brand identity looks for you is, and here's the example that I pulled out is, um, as a leader to people like you or not like you. And I get it. I went really broad because there's like, do people respect you or not respect you? There are different ways that people determine that. So I'm just going very general. Do they like you or not like you? And the example that I'm going to bring to you, right? I use the gym as an example, but the boardroom example that I want to bring here today is workshops, right? Raise your hand if you've ever had to attend a workshop put on by someone, right? It could be, an HR mandated workshop that you have to do. I mean, even if it's a CBT, right? Even if something that an online like webinar gets rolled out and it's mandatory, you have to watch it. So, brand identity here. Like, are your workshops something that's like, oh, did you see? She's putting out this workshop on so and so topic. And I mean, I don't even know if I care about the topic, but her workshops are always fire. Like, I just want to attend it because like I just want to hear what she has to say. I mean, she could talking about her dog for all I care about, but like she's so intriguing. She's such a great speaker. She's so dynamic. I want to attend her workshops. And even if she's talking about her dog, I always learn something from her. Right. So there's that aspect. Or is it like, ugh, like, right? Let's be real. When you get that notification on your Outlook calendar, you're like, oh, it's her. Oh, another workshop. Why? Why? Do we really have to go? And then, right when the company makes it mandatory, especially if it's regulatory, the company has to check off a certain box. Of course, they have to make this training mandatory so that you show up. But when you make something mandatory, what also happens is you have to pay for the man hours of the people in attendance, right? Say this workshop is an hour. You are paying an hour of time for every single person in that room to attend this workshop. And you're not even thinking about, okay, the workshop, even if it's a lunch and learn, right? Let's just use a lunch and learn, for example. But you're not thinking about the time of like, okay, they have to wrap up whatever they're doing and then pack up their lunches, come here, listen to the training, blah, 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 and then go back to work. You're talking about efficiency loss there as well, and that's the thing, right? When we're thinking about if you are the one putting on the workshop, if you are the one putting on the lunch and learn, a lot of times when we are in the creation of that workshop, what are we thinking about? If we're talking about the actual cost and quantifying the cost of our leadership, we're not thinking about brand erosion. We're not thinking about like what are people going to think when they attend. It's like, okay, I have a certain number of criteria that I need to cover in this workshop, especially if it's something that's mandatory, the ABC. These are the things I want to, and we're looking at the content from that perspective. But we're not looking at it from the perspective of how is this going to affect my brand identity? And again, how does brand identity apply to you at your work, right? Brand identity is what gets you promoted, right? There are things that are written on paper for sure. Like, right? There are things that you do for the company that are documented, but what about the stuff that's undocumented, right? This is part of your brand identity. And I'll just throw this story, a bonus story in here, right? My husband came home from work and he said, you know, his boss got taken into the office to just go over. They're doing quarterly reviews at this point, and his reviews of how the leadership perceived him and his leadership were very negative and derogatory. And it's like, but if you talk to his direct reports, which my husband is one of them, right? So it's like main boss, middle manager, my husband, or the people that work under this guy, they love him, and his brand identity is strong with his constituents. But apparently, there's some work that needs to be done for his brand identity rolling upwards. Apparently, he's not in the vision of the company or how the company wants to see things rolled out. So there is a disparity in how leadership is perceived going down and how it is perceived going up. So, all of that to say, we have to make sure we quantify the cost of all of our decisions. So, anyway, back to the cost of this workshop, because in my ecosystem, I talk about the time wheel, where it's time, ideas, money, and energy. These are the 4 resources that we're always managing, whether it's in our personal life, right? We have time, ideas, money, and energy in our personal lives. We have time, ideas, money, and energy in the entrepreneurial space, right? I know a lot of my content is geared towards entrepreneurs because that's who I've worked with very recently, but I can always relate time, ideas, money, and energy to the corporate space. So back to the analogy of this workshop. So the time cost, I kind of alluded to it, right? Are your people eager to be there, or do they feel like they're being forced? And that's going to affect, right, your brand identity. And also mentally, are they there? Are they engaged? Like, is this a good use of their time? Because, right, you could have a mandatory meeting, but if they're mentally checked out and all you're doing is checking, a box, then it's like, was that money, time well spent? And, right, time well spent. Right? We only have 24 hours in a day, and at work, right, you have 8 hours or whatever. Like, I came from a company that allowed 4 10s. But right, you're there for four days a week, but you have the 10 hours. And honestly, the 4 10s are really great because I've done 4 10s, I've done 5 8s, I've done 12-hour shifts. And I can tell you, right, the warm-up period, the immersion that needs to happen is right in an 8-hour day. Like, oh, I need to get the coffee, I need to read my email. That right, there's that whole morning part that gets eaten up. And then there's all these mandatory meetings. And then you have, okay, your actual focus time focused on work. Oh, then there's a lunch break. Oh, then it's like, okay, you got to get back into it. You got to get back in the zone, got, get your concentration up and get refocused. And then you're like, oh, what is there, like an hour, 2-hour block in the afternoon that you're really focused on work? And then God forbid they throw on an afternoon meeting where you're like, oh, I was just on a roll. Oh my gosh. And then next thing you know, oh, it's 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, whatever time you clock out. What did I get done today? Right. And from a payroll perspective, you paid someone or you got paid, right? You got paid 8 hours for maybe 4 hours of actual output of work. Right. And if you're an entrepreneur, on that flip side, can your business survive just doing 4 hours of work every day? Because, right, we're not getting paid for the time that we're not producing. And like even if you spend time on marketing, you're not getting paid for that time. Right? You're not like at corporate where you're just sitting behind your desk and the clock's ticking and it's like, okay, I get paid whether I do something or not. In entrepreneurship, every right time is money. And there is that factor that you have to factor in. So um now in the time wheel concept, time and money are directly proportionate, right? Meaning like one offsets the other. If you have a lot of time, right, you'll do it yourself. Or if you have more money than time, then most likely you'll probably pay someone to help you get more of your time back. And this could mean, hiring a house cleaner so that you're not spending your entire Saturdays cleaning the house, right? And you can get that time back, time that you would rather spend with your family. And we're not always thinking about the time versus money concept because sometimes it's like, oh, okay, let me just do it myself because I don't have the money. I don't want to spend the money to pay a housekeeper to clean. Like, what is the cost of that? And that's when you have to determine, like, what would I be doing with those hours instead? What could I be doing with those hours instead? And again, like this concept mostly applies to entrepreneurship because, right, time really is money in entrepreneurship. Um, but like that example, I could be paying someone to clean my house because if my rates are higher than the housekeeper's rates, then for sure, like giving that 2 hours back to me and my business is going to pay off because you're going to have that gap, that pay gap that that's accounted for. So that's the time versus money thing with the time wheel. Then you have the other piece, ideas and energy, and I'm going to cover those in the workshop analogy, right? Ideas. Again, we have a lot of ideas. So here's the ideas versus energy, where they are directly proportionate on the time wheel. We have a lot of ideas, and then we struggle when it comes time to execute. Or you could be vice versa, right? You're really good at execution, but you're like, I'm fresh out of ideas. So you have to manage that proportionately. And a lot of times in entrepreneurship, we see it like, oh, I have idea after idea after idea. And we also see it in corporate where you go to a meeting and it's a project meeting and you're like, oh, and you have that one person, oh, what if we did it this way? What if we did it this way? What if we did it this way? How much time, energy, and effort are you going to be spending to manage all of those ideas that have been generated? Because it's, oh yeah, we'll just bring out the whiteboard and just brainstorm, write out all of these ideas, which is good, right? You want to create an environment where you're grabbing ideas from the people in your people group so that, right, you're harnessing the energy of their ideas. So that's the good part. But you also have to take into account, like, if you do that, what is it costing you to go through all of those ideas on the board? And there's also the thing where, like, if you're asking for ideas from everyone and as you're writing them down, it's like, oh, this one is not going to fly. But yet, oh, I have to honor him because he said something. I want to put it on the board because if I don't put it on the board, then it's going to look like I'm, you know, not taking his ideas seriously and he's not going to give me ideas the next time, right? So that's, again, the cost of our decisions. Every single micro decision that you're making is causing mental bandwidth, right? And we don't think about that. We don't think about the mental energy it's taking to hold and make these micro decisions all day long. It's like, do I want coffee or matcha? Do I want sugar? Do I want Splenda? We're always making these micro decisions and it's taking energy bandwidth to make these decisions. So, right, the cost of your ideas. If your workshop is uninspiring, like, are you wasting innovation potential? Meaning, you have the people there for an hour. It's like, oh, I could have been doing something else. I was really on the brink of something innovative. But yet I'm here at this workshop. Or then you also have the people who are on their phones. Like they're not even paying attention. Like you should have just not been here. And again, back to brand identity. Like, is this helping your brand identity? Because, right, if you put on one sucky workshop, it's like, oh, don't go to her workshop. Like, they're trash. Like, just find a way to get out of it. So all of that time, energy, effort you spent into curating this workshop, and then people don't show up. Like, that's a waste, right? And we don't think about these decisions when we're planning everything out because we live in this myopic place. But if we can open our vision to say, hey, oh yeah, what is the cost of that decision? What will be the cost of that decision? Oh, and honestly, I brought this to the table because it's something that I have always done. I don't know if it's because I grew up in a scarcity environment where I kind of had to calculate all of these costs for myself because I had to, present my case anytime like I wanted to do something, I wanted to buy something. Like I had to bring my case in order to get my project funded by my parents. That's just the way it was growing up. So I was always calculating the cost. Like, okay, my friend's mom's gonna drive us, so you don't have to. Um, they're gonna pay my way in, so you don't have to. And always calculating the cost before I presented my ideas to my parents because they were just really busy. We didn't have a lot of money, and so they were always working to make sure that we had all of our costs covered. And so, right, I got really good at that, and I used those skill sets in project management, managing multi-million dollar projects, and sometimes saving the company millions because I looked at things in that way, like, well, what if we did it this way? And that going back to the ideas, right? If you allow your people to have the space to present ideas, and of course, if you're the leader, you have total control of like, okay, well, this is a good idea. Let's explore it. And like, honestly, like but you have to take ownership of that leadership that you have. It's like, well, I get what you're saying, sir, but with even if it's like information that you're not allowed to share outside of your leadership group, like the constituents don't need to know every single detail, or they don't need to be privy to those details. Say, sir, I get it, but there are things coming up that will make this idea non-executable, so we're going to just put this guy on the side for now, and just take ownership of that decision that you made. Because I mean, we're going to get to the the personality choices, whether you're a people pleaser, whether you are, over controlling. We're going to get to the cost of those leadership decisions in a future episode, but I wanted to bring this quantification perspective here today. Because time, ideas, money, and energy, a lot of times we don't quantify those. We calculate the cost of how much is this going to cost to produce, create, manufacture, whatever. But we're not calculating, the hours, the time, the people, the energy that is going to take to actually, generate, generate the ideas, plan out this project. We're not quantifying that cost. The only cost that well, I don't know about where you work, but for most places that I've worked, we only calculated the cost of execution. We've never, calculated the cost going into like the planning cost. It was only, like time and materials in the execution pieces. So there's that. And that leads me to the last one, energy. So emotional energy is currency, right? That's talking about that brand identity. Are you building brand equity? Are people energized when they're around you? Or is it eroding your brand of like, ugh, like, this is an energy suck, it's a time suck, it's whatever suck. And your ability to lead and how you're making decisions will add or detract from your brand identity. Because it's like, ugh, if it's low vibe to be around her. I mean, you could be very good at the technical part, but if you're not really good at verbalizing the execution process, and it's like your leadership value kind of goes down. It's like, and you could be very good at one aspect of your job, like behind the screen, like creating spreadsheets. But are you good at the delivery and the managing of the people? Because there's people who have different skill sets, and we're going to go through all of that here on this podcast going forward. But I needed to, honestly, I needed to create this framework of the leadership breakdown, actually breaking down the cost of your leadership decisions, because that's what the majority of this podcast is going to be about. So all of that being said, right? This episode is really a leadership reality check, because we don't quantify the cost of our decisions. I mean, I know I didn't, not tangibly, but what if I told you that I actually have found a way to quantify everything that I've talked about on today's episode? I have a calculator that quantifies the cost of crappy workshops, the cost of brand erosion. Like, I'm not a math genius. I had AI help me to figure this out, but it's been so like once that dam was broken, I'm like, oh my gosh, quantifying the cost of all these different things. And now when I talk to my clients, I'm like, okay, that decision you just made, that cost. So what was the cost of that? And we go through the time cost, the ideas cost, the money cost, the energy cost, and we just break it all down according to the spreadsheet. And it's like, oh, that actually costs. And I brought this up to someone last week, because I'm going to be on her podcast talking about this. And she was like, oh my gosh. And I use the disc. So my personality quiz is based on the disc, but it's also based on different, because there's so many 4-prong personality quizzes out there. Am I right? But I brought all of them together, kind of smushed them together and made it my own, because I realized although a lot of them are comprehensive, some of them were missing that emotional component. And that's what I wanted to bring to the table, because it's the cost of our decisions, whether it's mentally, emotionally, physically, right? A lot of times we only think about cost in the physical realm. We're not thinking about cost in the emotional realm. Like, say you have, going back to that leadership conversation with my husband's boss, right? How much time was wasted decompressing after a pretty crappy meeting, because it was a negative meeting? How much time was spent decompressing after that meeting? And he was on the clock. So not like he was not getting work done, but the energy of venting, right? That was all happening on the clock. So say he vented over the rest of his shift, like quantify it was 3 hours. So that's 3 hours of not producing. And I'm not saying that you should micromanage your people, not at all. But I'm just saying, if you want maximum efficiency, right, you have to understand the cost of the emotional impact that you're having on your people, the mental impact that you're having on your people, and how is that that cost? We don't quantify those costs. So again, back to the cost calculator, you guys, the cost calculator. I figured out the way to quantify all of that, the emotional erosion, the mental erosion. Um, Again, just like the cost of crappy decisions. I mean, and then you can also quantify the this net savings of really good decisions, but you don't have that data right now. Well, you may have it, and I'm like, good for you. Let everybody else know that this is a thing, because the cost calculator is really the place where we sit down and, you know, you go grab the data. How many hours am I spending here? Even like email. How many hours are your people spending on email? How many hours are you spending explaining? How many hours are you spending micromanaging? And right, and these are all leadership behaviors that are happening, and we're not quantifying that. So back to the example I was giving, I was talking to someone about this exact thing. Because she was like, "So tell me, how does this calculator actually work?" I was like, "Look." She's like, "Okay, okay. I have a client." She's also another leadership coach. She's like, "I have a client who, is always having ideas and always throwing them out there. And, I see the chaos because she's coaching them, right? So I see the chaos that's happening in her company every time she has a new idea. And then her team is scrambling, trying to fit this new project into the projects that they already have. And it's like, yeah, you know, her wanting to control things, wanting to micromanage things, wanting things to be just right, they are putting, there's an actual cost quantified with that. The cost of micromanaging, the cost of control, right? And as we're chatting, she's like, yes, she does not delegate. And- right. So that's one of the cost factors in there. You're the CEO, whatever your pay rate is, whatever your title is, you let's say control is one of your issues and micromanaging is something that you find yourself doing. No shame. It's just awareness. Like, okay, I'm making this pay rate. I could delegate this to someone who's actually better than me, that maybe at a different pay rate, and this is actually their skill set. So maybe I should just give it to them, right? What's the cost there? And we're also not talking about just hour per hour, you doing it versus them doing it. Yes, there is the hours that you're going to have to spend in the explanation, right? Explaining to them how to get it done. But let's say you create an SOP, and then every time this one particular thing comes up, it's like, all you got to do is send an email. Hey, Carol, can you take care of this? You already know what to do. Bam. Or if they don't know what to do, say, hey, refer to this SOP that we created the last time we were together. And I explained this to you when you were first trained on it. Okay, here's the SOP as a reminder, and go. Just let me know if you have any questions. Ah, and I get it. It's a personality quirk if you are holding on to tasks that could actually benefit by being delegated, because there's that. And that's also how I factored in the emotional cost of your decisions in the cost calculator. So if you've listened to this entire episode and you're like, oh my gosh, Kylie, like what you said makes total sense, and I want to take advantage of talking about this cost calculator with you, like where can I get the goods? There's going to be a link down in the chat, down in the show notes, where you can click on that, and it'll give you all the information to come into the cost calculator. You get access to a worksheet that's going to have you quantify all the numbers that we'll need to plug into the cost calculator. And when you book your session, what's going to happen is we're going to have all those numbers for you, and we're going to be breaking it down. And you can just see the cost overrun that's happening in your business, at your job. And even if you work at a job, right? And say, like, these are not your dollars. I think the one thing that made me the better project manager on the job is because I looked at company money like it was my own money. I'm like, these guys are not working. They need to be out in the field, like chop chop, like let's process their paperwork and get them out in the field, because this group has a crane attached. Like every hour the crane sits there, it's not just a crane rental, it's the crane operator, which is 3 times as much as, you know, the labor force. I'm like, these guys need to be out in the field, get it done and get it out. And I was like, why why do people not think of these things? You know, it used to bog my mind, and I'm like, well, maybe that's why I left, because I needed to be here with you to give you these mind-blowing epiphanies, like how my brain had when I was going through them. So anyhow, go ahead, go down to the show notes, click on the link to grab the cost calculator. And then once you're done filling it out, go ahead, book a time, and we'll go over it. And you're going to see that, oh my gosh, it's going to open up so much for you. And I can't wait for you to grab that calculator and quantify the cost. Because, girl, we we just need to be better at this, because it's the cost of our leadership decisions that are making and breaking us as leaders. So I will leave you with that for today, and I will see you again next time. Bye.